the one and only Nate Morton, drummer to the stars and now for the future stars. I know quite a bit about you. I've been following you for roughly 20 years, and I know you've been doing this longer than that. So I'm not trying to be like, yeah, man, I know everything about you, because I definitely don't. But, I will record an introduction post our interview. But just to give our listeners a bit of a view, I'm going to summarize a few things here, and then I'm going to ask you, Nate, to just kind of tell us who you are from your side. So, from my side, I first saw Nate play on a show called Rockstar Inxs and then Rockstar Supernova. I was an instant fan, all the show drummy kind of stuff with the licks and the chops to match. It was just mind blowing stuff. And so I've followed you ever since. I know you've done stints with Vanessa Colton, Paul Stanley. You're now with The Voice. You did the American Idol stuff a few years back. You've got a resume, man. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us a brief bullet point kind of introduction as to who Nate Morton is for the listeners who might not know.
Interesting. So I believe that it's easiest to sum up, quote unquote, who Nate Morton is, less so dealing with gigs, resume, this person, that artist, and so on, and more so dealing with the personality and or sort of mental makeup of where I started and where I've gotten to. And so I will simply say this. My first and earliest musical influences were, for example, Animal from the Muppet Show, the Tennessee State University marching band. If you're familiar with HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, their marching bands, it's a particular thing. It's a particular stylized, groovy, musical, moving sort of thing. But that married to, for example, Michael Jackson, Kiss, Stevie Wonder, George Clinton. These are some of my earliest influences from the age of, say, 5 to 7 years old.
Cool.
So it started with that. And over time, and again, not discussing necessarily who I played with. Like, I'm not even to the playing professionally and gigging with artist XYZ yet. Through that time, through high school, it became about bands like Fugazi, Minor Threat. If anyone listening or watching isn't familiar with these bands, now with, the YouTubes out there on the worldwide interwebs, you can Google these bands. Fishbone, 24/7 Spies. That was through high school, while at the same time, I was being exposed by my father to Chick Corea and Miles Davis and Mahavishnu Orchestra and things of that nature. So from the very beginning, when it was sort of an eclectic fruit bowl, if you will, of the different artists that I listened to, that continued through high school. And I'm fortunate that for whatever reason, my personality from the beginning up to today, my personality is such that when I'm exposed to something new, it doesn't move away the other things that I'm already listening to. It just kind of joins them, right?
That's cool.
Right? There are times where it's like, oh, I discovered this new thing. Oh, I used to listen to that, but now I found this new thing. Whereas for me, it's like, now I found this new thing, so I'm listening to this new thing and what I was listening to. So that just continued. And the more that I was exposed to, the more that what I liked to listen to and play grew. And that led into the early part of my career when I was maybe in high school, sorry, college, or maybe just out of college, and I'm playing with wedding bands that are doing primarily calypso music, or I'm playing with a cover band on the weekends that's doing primarily hard rock music, and I'm playing a jazz brunch on Wednesday and Sunday mornings where I'm playing standards. So that just continued to grow up to and beyond college and led to the good fortune of me being able to play with a pretty wide array of artists across a pretty wide array of genres. So yeah, so that's kind of what I would. That's so to answer the question, who Nate Morton is. I think it's that. I don't consider myself necessarily designed. What am I talking about? I don't consider myself necessarily as defined by the artists I've worked with as I do defined by my attitude about music and what I'd like to try to explore and adventure and create and be a part of.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I love the fact that straight off the bat, you've gone into sort of headspace kind of stuff, because that's really what we're going to discuss, not too deep, obviously, because we try to keep it as light as possible. But, you know, I find that nowadays there's, like you say, it's easy to YouTube and Google things, and there's such an influx of information. You want to learn how to play drums, there's like thousands of tutorials. You want to learn how to, I don't know, do whatever skill, and there's so much of that stuff, but no one really talks about, some of the headspaces that this career can take you through. And I'm sure every career is similar, but because we're focusing on music, these questions will be related to
Sure.
music. So I want to stay a little bit on the early years, but not for very long. um, again, most of this information is available through things like your website and stuff. There's a few things out there. Like, I read that you really started getting into music, or drumming in particular, around 4 or 5. Um, you just mentioned Animal from the Muppets, so I can imagine you were probably, was that an audio thing that caught you, or was it a visual thing?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so good answer again. Well, so let's kind of like twist this a bit. So I'm assuming you were, like you kind of just touched upon, really into music, and once you realized that that was your thing, it sounds like you really gravitated towards it. Was there a time, once you kind of got playing, once you knew that you were digesting all these different genres and stuff, was there a time that you can possibly remember where the switch came from, well, I'm doing this because I just love doing it and I feel good, to, I'm going to try and make this a career and I'm going to pivot in that direction? Did that just happen by accident, or were there mechanical steps along the way that took you to the career path?
That's a great question. So the way that you sort of set it up was like, hey, did you at a certain point you just did this because you loved it, right? So that's from age 5. I just did it because I loved it. By the way, to touch on Animal quickly, I was a hyper kid. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I was a destructive kid, but I could get up to no good, and I was kind of a little bit all over the place. And even at 5 years old, I saw that Animal as well was kind of all over the place, and maybe at times could be up to no good. Could be kind of a little bit nutty. And I saw myself in that, and I saw, here's Animal. I'm 5 years old. I'm not thinking Animal is a puppet and there's
Of course.
moving around Animal's hands. I'm just watching this crazy, high energy, kinetic dude play drums. And I thought maybe I could channel my own crazy, hyperkinetic energy into something like that. So that was the thing. So when you earlier asked about was it an audio versus video, it was literally both. It was literally all encompassing. To your more recent question, in terms of when was it like, oh, you could do this for a living? High school. My drum instructor, Grant Menifee, as I said before, played from 5 years old all the way, and I'm just banging on stuff, having a great old time. Now, let me actually, put a pin in Grant Menifee for one moment. I was around I was probably around 9 or 10, and I was playing piano as well. I started piano lessons when I was 6. By the way, there's a fly in my room. And so if you occasionally see me go like this, I'm not hallucinating. There's literally a fly in my room. And I had a fly swatter here, but I thought that looked really like, what is going on with this guy? So because there's a lamp over there and the fly lands on it sometimes. And I kind of want to reach for my fly swatter and get ya. So anyway, if you see me doing this, that's what it is. I don't have a nervous tick. Like,
And you could have kept the fly swatter there, and I would have just thought you figured out some kind of weird technique, like a new sort of brush thing going on. I'd be like, man, I'd start taking fly swatters in my stick bag.
this new concept. Some guys play the pocket. I'm playing the
I love it, man.
anyway, I'm sorry. Here we go. So so when I was around 10 years old, I had been playing piano for a couple of years. And at a certain point, the piano that I'd been playing on at my grandparents' home went away. I don't really remember the exact circumstances, but for one reason or another, it went away. And my grandmother would recall and would tell me as I became a young adult, she would say, Duty Bug, my nickname is Duty Bug to her. She would call me Duty Bug. Duty Bug, I remember you just laid on the floor crying all day, saying, there goes my career. So apparently, even at 10 years old, somewhere in my headspace, I thought,
Figured it out. Yeah.
now, in a more legitimate and more practical and more concrete way, in high school, my drum instructor, Grant Menifee, private instructor, said to me one day, I don't say this to a lot of guys, but just so you know, if you really wanted to work your butt off, you just might be able to make a living doing this.
Hmm.
That was it. That was all it took.
Cool.
And my love and passion and enjoyment of playing is no less present today than it was when I was 5 years old. I mean, I'm
That's
still
cool.
5 years old banging on pots and pans. So I consider myself very fortunate.
That's so cool, man. So okay, so let's just stay on that sort of theme for a second. So once he says that, what happens? What do you do? Do you then go study? Does it lead you to a gig? You mentioned the wedding bands and the cover bands and the standards and all that sort of stuff. Was it a matter of you were going to take everything just to make a living, and then maybe some of those things led to bigger things, or were you always aiming for something as big as The Voice?
Every single thing you just said, of all the things you just said, it's important to point out that they can all be true at once.
Yeah.
They can all be true at once. Did you take everything just so you could make a living? Yep. Is that what led to you playing weddings, et cetera, et cetera? Yep. Did you have higher aspirations to do bigger gigs? Yep. Did you take steps to further your education to better yourself as a musician? Yep. All of those things are true. It so happens that Grant Menifee went to Berklee College of Music. And I was never a in spite of my chosen profession, I am by nature a practical person. So I like to try to do things to put myself in the position to have the greatest opportunity to succeed. And at that moment, what I felt like would give me the greatest opportunity to succeed was going to Berklee College of Music. Now, this is an important thing to point out. I took a little detour where I went to University of Maryland for about a year because I did pretty good at math and I did pretty good at science, and I was fortunate to have been offered an engineering scholarship to go to University of Maryland. So I thought, all right, well, what I really want to be doing is playing drums, but worst case scenario, that doesn't work. What's a super practical degree that I can just sort of, pick up by the wayside just in case? Okay, well, newsflash, mechanical engineering is not a pick up by the wayside.
No, no, it is not.
You have to work every bit as hard to do that as to do, being a professional musician. I got into that mechanical engineering program, and I determined very, very quickly that I was not ready to do the amount of work required to succeed in that lane. And part of the reason why I wasn't willing to do the amount of work required was because ultimately that was not the lane I wanted to be in anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So if someone tells you, hey, Travis, you can go do this wonderful thing that you want to do, but just in case, hey, man, do this manual labor. Hey, paint this house. Your interest in doing a really great job at painting that house is pretty minimal because you're like, yo, I'm only doing this to get it done so I can go to this other thing. So I changed majors halfway through my year at University of Maryland. Then I very quickly made the determination that in terms of getting the skill set to be successful in a mainstream contemporary musical environment, I wasn't going to get that skill set at University of Maryland. So then, partly under the influence of, well, greatly, frankly, under the influence of Grant Menifee, I transferred a semester later to Berklee College of Music. So, dovetailing that all together with what you just said, once I was at Berklee, yes, I was taking any and everything because my designs, first and foremost, were on making a living as a musician. That was it. And so if that looked like playing weddings and playing covers and teaching and playing jazz brunches, that's what I was going to do because that was, and I had a peer of mine, his name is Troy, and Troy and I talked about this a lot. Troy was an excellent drummer, still is, excellent drummer, but Troy always had what I'll call a straight job. He always had a straight job. And I talked to him about it one day and I said, Troy, you're a really strong player. This is probably just after Berkeley. I said, man, you're a really strong player. You could probably make a living playing full time. And he said, you know, Nate, because all you do is play full time, you pretty much have to say yes to everything. No matter how far away it is, if it doesn't pay enough money, if it's with a band that you don't necessarily love the music, you've got to say yes because that's your income. Whereas I have this straight job, which basically means I can pick and choose what I want to do based on my degree of enjoyment of the circumstance. To which I said, that's amazing. And you are 100% right. And as I said earlier, multiple things can be true at once.
Yeah.
For me, I felt like my worst day playing music was better than my best day would have been doing anything else. My worst day, I'm driving too far away to play with a group of musicians that I don't love for not enough money. That beats an 8-hour day sitting in a cubicle doing anything that you do for 8 hours a day sitting in a cubicle. With all due respect to anyone who spends 8 hours a day sitting in a cubicle, I just knew that my mental state of mind would crack and fall into many pieces if I tried to go down that road.
Yeah. It's a great way to look at it, you know. And I've noticed I've had similar things said about the job thing, and I've noticed that some of those people, and I'm stereotyping, of course, but some of them become so secure with getting that paycheck at the end of each week or each month that some of them land up almost eventually not doing music at all. Now, I don't know Troy, so this is no disrespect to guys like that. I'm just simply stereotyping because of what I've seen, but you know, it does make a lot of sense. Um, so tell me, Nate, so once you're at Berkeley and you're taking all these things, was that your general approach to networking and meeting people within the industry? And additionally, excuse me, additionally, what could you potentially advise people who are trying to get out there on how they would maybe go about networking nowadays?
You're asking great question after great question. Um,
Well, you did email me a challenge, so yeah, I put a bit of thought into these.
gold stars for Travis. So the crux of your question has to do with networking. Did I go to Berkeley in order to network? No. No, I went to Berkeley in order to further my skills. I went to Berkeley because I would be able to be exposed to all manner of great facilities and great instructors, etc. Now, I was obviously surrounded by a lot of like-minded, young, determined, aspiring professional musicians. So a certain degree of networking happens naturally. In my personal experience, the networking that I've done has tended to be fairly organic. In other words, I happen to play a gig with a particular band. I exchange numbers with those cats because I just played a gig with them. I stay in touch with those cats, and that's kind of the way that my networking has gone. I've never walked into a situation with a mindset of who's here that I can meet, who's here that I can meet, that I can exchange numbers. So to put it to sort of put it into a sentence, I always say you want to network without making people feel as though they are being actively networked. So as a result of that, I've never been a, send out the once a month newsletter to the 200 people on my contacts list and say, hey, just letting you know, I've got Thursday the 10th and this day and this day and this day available this month. No disrespect, again, to anyone. I got a friend named Nathan, right? I'm Nate, he's Nathan. And he always teases me because he always says, you're so concerned about being canceled that you always preface everything. You always Wait, no disrespect, right? But it's true. No disrespect to anyone who does that. That that thing works, evidently. It's just never been my style. So if I want to let 100 people know that I'm available in the spring, let's just say, I'm going to start at the top of my contacts list and I'm going to write 100 individual emails to those 100 people and I'm going to let them know that I'm available in the spring. Is that the most efficient way to go about doing things? Absolutely not. But my personality, that's the way that I have to do it because I believe that what we do is based on relationships, and relationships are important to me. And so, rather than you, Travis, getting a message that says, that you look on it, and it says it's to Nate Morton, right? Because that's what you do, right? You send it to yourself, right? And then you CC 200 undisclosed recipients or whatever it is, right? So you're not going to get that from me ever.
Yeah.
Um, that's just the way that I've always worked. So, bearing all that in mind and bringing that all the way back to what you were saying, networking is very important. Yes, it did start at Berkeley. Yes, I do get calls from people to this day that I went to Berkeley with, and I have that relationship. I have several people from that era still in my close group of friends and musicians that I work and play with frequently. Let's piggyback that onto your other question, which had to do with how do you sort of generate that? What does that look like today? When I moved to town, there was a bass player. I moved to town in 19, town being Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles in 1998. And I did what you do when you move to a new place, which is you go and you try to go to the jam sessions, and you try to sit in, and you do try to meet people, etc. And there was a bass player in town at that time, and this is 1998. And he walked around with a satchel, and in that satchel was were copies of his DVD-ROM. Okay, so this will tell you how old I am. 98, or how old that is, right? Satchel of DVD-ROMs. And so whereas a lot of people walked around with, a pen to write their number on a napkin, and then other people, like myself, walked around with business cards to hand out to people, here's this dude walking around with a satchel of DVD-ROMs. And he says, "Oh, hey, man, Travis, nice to meet you, man. I'm Joe. Here's my DVD-ROM." And then you go home and you put Joe's DVD-ROM in your computer. There's Joe's resume. There's audio examples of Joe playing. There's video examples of Joe playing. There's Joe's bio. There's testimonials of people saying how great Joe is. At the time, he was sort of known as the guy with the DVD-ROMs. Like, that guy's weird. Oh, he's the guy with the DVD-ROMs. Well,
Yeah.
he was quite ahead of his time now, wasn't he?
Very much so.
Very much so. Because now the version of that is everyone's Instagram. Or if you're old like me, your Facebook. And that's what people have. Or your YouTube channel. And these days, that's what it is. So I talk to cats a lot and I say, whenever you ask me about how to get a gig, let's say, right? I don't really know the answer. But whatever I do know, I always tell people, bear in mind, I've tried to update it, but ultimately my base of knowledge is from like a 25-year-old operating system. Okay? My operating system was established about 25 years ago. What I did then, which would have been literally burning CDs. I'm burning CDs. And on that CD, there's 6 minutes of music. And in that 6 minutes of music, there's 20 examples of 30-second snippets of me playing different styles. And I'm mailing that CD. So what that looks like now is your Instagram channel.
Yeah.
That or your YouTube channel, rather, or your Instagram account. These days, it's no longer handing out a DVD-ROM. However, it is very much that in the sense that if I say, "Oh, you need a drummer? I can't do it, but call my buddy Mark." Mark, I called you Mark. Sorry, Travis.
Travis Mark, it's all good. It happens all the time.
Hey, so call my buddy TM. Call my buddy TM. They're going to go, "Okay, cool." The first thing they're going to do is call you. No, it's not.
Yeah.
The first thing they're going to do is go to your Instagram. They're
Yeah.
going to go to your Instagram. These days, auditions don't happen necessarily by way of show up and there's 25 guys in the room auditioning on drums and you're cycling in one at a time and playing the 3 songs from the CD that you went to the porch of the musical director and picked up. That's a 25-year-old operating system. These days, it's send me links. So 25 guys get an email that says, send me links. And of those 25, they watch those links. Then they go, let's hear these 2 guys.
Yeah.
Or let's hear these 3 guys. Or maybe they say, call that guy. Maybe no audition ever happens. So if I had to put a finer point on it, I would simply say that, like it or not, social media is a necessary evil that we sort of have to make room for in our professional life and our networking life. I don't know the secrets. I don't have 100,000 Instagram followers, you know. Um, but I do know that or I do feel like you have to have a bit of that presence. So if someone calls you for a country gig, you can shoot them a clip of you playing country,
Yeah.
or So that's kind of where it is. So the to close on that, the premise hasn't changed. The premise is still meet as many people as you can, exchange information, stay in touch, etc. The medium by which you represent yourself has changed. Right? Could you imagine today? Could you imagine today? Could you imagine if I just got to town today and I was like, I'm gonna burn 30 CDs and send to people. Like of those 30 people, most of them would be like, the hell is this thing? Right?
Oh,
And then
roast for my coffee.
right, exactly. And then of the 5 people who know what it is, you're lucky if 2 of them actually have a means to play it.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It depresses me, man, because I still love CDs and stuff, and you know,
I
like
still
no cars have CD players anymore. It's like I got this huge CD collection, but I can't play them in anywhere.
Can I ask you a personal question, TM?
Of course.
How old a fella are you?
I'm 42.
Mm, okay, I got you by a dozen years. Well, not quite a dozen, almost. Are you of an age such that you remember record stores?
Yes.
Right? You would have been younger because I would have been just after college when record stores went out. So you would have been somewhere around like early high school kind of when record stores went out. There's still a handful, but the idea of going and browsing. So point being, to this day, if you said to me, "Oh man, Nate, I got this band. You got to check them out." They're called, you know, Mirror in the Hallway. I'm probably gonna okay. Probably my first step, I'm going to go to Amazon.com. I'm going to look for an actual physical CD by Mirror. Well, no, my first step is I'm going to go to Amoeba Records,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to look for the actual CD by Mirror in the Hallway. If I can't find it there, I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to order the physical CD by Mirror in the Hallway. Now, mind you, when I get it, I'm going to import it into my iTunes so that I have it on all my devices.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy the CD. And if I can't find it there and it's only available digitally, I'm going to go to my iTunes Music Store and pay the $9.99 to own the actual files of the MP3s or the M4As or whatever the heck it is to have.
Yeah.
I don't have Spotify. I don't have any streaming music services. And I'm not rattling my saber of righteousness like they don't pay the artist and it's just me being old. I want to own it, even if I own it as a file on my computer archive. I don't want to have it as a subscription thing and Spotify goes away one day and so too does all of my entire musical collection.
I think about this very similar, because I too still buy records and CDs.
Ah.
And I too do not have Spotify. And it's such a conflicting thing for me because I understand its importance. I'm not so into the negative sides of it. Um, but there's something for me that even though you know how record deals are structured and how the music industry has kind of depleted money wise, or so they say. I mean, billions are still generated worldwide every year, but nonetheless, not what it once was. I still feel good knowing that, hey, I just bought Nate's new CD, and he might only get 50 cents from that CD, but I bought that CD. And again, it's becoming more of a challenge to play those things. But I feel like it's a great way to support artists. It's why I'm such a big advocate for platforms like Bandcamp, because like Bandcamp, when compared to so many of the other streaming services, and they're not a streaming service per se, although you can stream a few times each artist or whatever, they've made it so, I don't know, so ground level to help support artists. And I just think that's great, you know. You know, a conversation I've had many, many times on the podcast over the years is when when I was younger and I would go to these CD stores, record stores, all those kinds of things, I was always playing in bands, you know, as I'm sure you would. And I would always think to myself, how do you get your band or your artist, whatever you were representing, to stand out among these 30,000 albums in this store? It would always play on me. I got so into marketing at some point along this music journey, because that's what I always thought. Like, man, here's your top 20, and then here's like a whole bunch of stuff, and then they've put it in all these genres, but how do you get seen? And I never quite figured that out, apart from, you know, putting loads of money into maybe having a different type of product that stood out. Maybe you had like a different type of packaging that couldn't go on the standard shelf. That's become so much harder now, because with like Spotify numbers and streaming numbers, and I'm not even including Amazon or Apple or Deezer or Tidal or any of those. I'm purely on Spotify numbers. But like Spotify was getting 120,000 songs uploaded a day. That was pre AI music generators. So I'm imagining that that number has to have increased. I don't know for sure. So if anyone's listening to this, please don't quote me on that. But
The point is a good
but
one.
but I would imagine it's increased. So where it becomes difficult for original and independent musicians nowadays, among all the difficulty, of course, is when I was thinking that in record stores, you were competing with 10, maybe 20, maybe 30,000 different artists tops, right? Now you're competing with minimum 120,000 a day, every single day. So if you don't have either some kind of genius marketing plan, strategy, or something that's gone viral to help you market, or some kind of just really out the box, do something to get the world talking strategy, how do you get your music or your art, or you as a musician, how do you get seen? It's near impossible. It's not impossible because people are doing it, but it's near impossible.
Well, it's interesting because I remember when so everything has moved towards making it easier for everyone to put out their music. So let's go back to when I was in high school in a band that I mentioned earlier called Fugazi. And I remember being in my band in high school. I was in like a rock band, like my garage rock band in high school called Akamili, right? And I remember Fugazi, which was this band from Baltimore, and they, when they got money to make a record, didn't go in the studio and record a record. They, you know, bought recording equipment and they recorded a record themselves.
Yeah.
They released their own record without a label. And at that point, so we're talking about either like late 80s, we're talking about like 1990, give or take, and how groundbreaking that was at the time. So, ever since then, everything has moved towards making it easier and easier and easier and easier to release your music without a label. So
Yeah.
it's always seemed like that's right. Now the artists will get their due because now I don't need you, label. I can release my own stuff, right? So unfortunately, the the downside of everyone can release everything is everyone can release everything, right? So
Yeah.
there's just this giant overflow of so much stuff, right? So to your point, yeah, how do you get head and shoulders above any one thing? I mean, it's really quite fascinating. And to your earlier point too, which you said, despite the fact that every record label executive, is, coming to you with their pockets turned out, pleading poverty now, but they're still driving McLarens. So, so you're only gonna
Yeah.
get so much pity from me
Yeah.
anyway.
Exactly. So on that note, Nate, let's shift gears for a second. again, I don't want to go too down a dark path, but I want to talk a little bit about self doubt, lack of confidence, overall rejection within the music industry. Have you, and I'm sure you have, so I don't mean for that to sound like redundant, but have you got any experiences that you can potentially share with the listeners that might currently be going through motions like this, these down days, this I'm not good enough kind of thinking, that might allow them to realize that everybody goes through these kinds of things and they should really just keep going?
No, Travis. I've actually always succeeded at everything I've ever attempted to do, and I've never even sniffed failure or not achieving my highest aspirations. Question.
I knew it.
So I had an ongoing conversation with a friend of mine named Kelly, and at one point we had the idea that we wanted to put together. I think Modern Drummer may have done this way back in the day. We wanted to do an article essentially where you would just interview people based on exactly this. Every gig you've gotten fired from. Hey, let's talk. Let's not talk about the fact that you're on tour right now with fill in the blank giant artist. Let's talk about the time you got fired from so and so. Because I don't want to talk out of school, but I think that most of us have that story. I mean, I remember reading an article. I remember that particular article. I'll never find it. I'll never remember what issue it was in. But I do remember an excerpt where, if memory serves, and again, to your earlier point, if there's anyone out there listening and you fact check me and I'm wrong on this, then I beg forgiveness. But I feel like there was a part of that article where Vinny Colaiuta, right? That
Yeah.
dude, right? That up and coming whippersnapper. I think that guy's got a shot, right? Vinny Colaiuta getting fired from a session in favor of Jeff Porcaro. Now,
Yeah.
and obviously Porcaro was Porcaro, right? But Vinny is Vinny, right? But even at that level, even Vinny Colaiuta, has been fired from gigs, right? So yes, I'll try to be a little bit more concise in my answer here. Too late, I know. But I have been fired from gigs, and it's interesting because I remember moving out to LA and I got this gig with this particular artist, and I was like, wow. Like, it was one of my first gigs with an artist that I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to say, oh, I'm playing with Joe Philpott. So Joe's Philpott, he's from this particular band, and they were big in England once upon a time, and then they got this record. I didn't have to explain it. I was able to just say the artist's name. People were like, ooh. So I got
Yeah.
with that particular artist, and through or because of reasons that I won't go into, I was fired about 5 weeks later.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, and it was not long after I'd moved to LA. I'd only been out here for a couple of years, and I got that gig, and then I got fired. And I remember thinking, I I won't work again. Word is going to spread through all of LA that I got fired from that particular gig, and I'll never work again. And I came to find out that at least in this town, that doesn't really exist. People get fired all the time. And you, I mean, maybe you get fired because you just weren't the right fit for a situation. Maybe you get fired. Maybe you get fired because you do something dumb. And then by getting fired, you learn, like, oh, that was a dumb thing I did. And then you learn not to do that dumb thing. And then the next gig goes much better, we hope, right? So, yes. And I've even been in those situations. I've been in situations where I've literally had people say to me, and I quote, "You'll never work in this town again." I've literally had those situations. You'll never work in this town again. And what I've learned, again, is LA is really big. Now, maybe live in a smaller community and maybe there's only two bands in that town. Okay, well, maybe someone has the power to make you want to work in the town again. No one wields that kind of power in LA. So I think the best thing to do is, if you find yourself in a situation that maybe ends unfortunately with, you were the guy on the gig and now you're not the guy on the gig, you do your best to take whatever you can possibly learn from that situation. Hopefully, right? hopefully you learn from that situation and you take that information going forward into your next opportunities. This doesn't mean that people don't get fired for bogus reasons, or it doesn't mean that you don't, you might lose a gig because the artist's cousin decides they want to start playing drums. And the artist says, "Hey, we're going to make a change." All right, well, that's not on you. But
Yeah.
maybe you lose a gig because you were late to bus call 3 times in a row. Hey, newsflash, don't be late to bus call. You
Yeah.
learn, and you learn the hard way, but you'll hopefully be on time for bus call every time going forward on any subsequent
Yeah.
gig. So I I'm also too, I should point this out. I'm not a, no plan B. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm not a no plan B guy. Plan B is great. For me, I never felt like I had an option. And here's what I mean. Hey, Nate, when did you know you wanted to be a professional musician? Right? Now, this kind of goes back to our earlier question, but the reality is, once I got into my young adult life, I never really felt like there was a choice. I kind of felt like this is what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
the idea of getting fired from a gig and then that firing or that negative close to that chapter leading to me walking away from playing music, I never really saw me as having any other abilities or anything else that I could do. So I was going to continue to bang my head against that wall as long as it took.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, music is kind of a calling, and if you're called to do it, you just keep at it. You know.
Yeah. And firstly, I agree. And secondly, the calling thing has come up several times over the years as well. It's like a lot of people uh, they quote somebody, and I should know by now who they quoting, but it's something along the lines of, if you can do something else, do something else. But if you absolutely must do this,
It's
then
the best
you got
possible.
to do it, you
So
know?
so I heard so I'm gonna again. You need a fact checker. When they do like political debates and there's like a running crawl of fact checks, as it going on. You need that for this podcast because I heard a similar quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but yes, it was something along the lines of, to your point, yeah, if you can do something else, do it. However, if you are chosen to do music, it's one of the most rewarding career paths you will ever find, you know? And again, I butchered that. In my head, for some reason, I associate that butchered quote with Eric Clapton. For some reason, I feel like I heard that was something that Eric Clapton said. I also heard there's a couple of others, and I'm gonna misquote and misattribute these. But one of them was also, of course, you don't choose music; music chooses you,
I've heard that one as well.
right? And then in not exactly related, but I'm gonna go for this one as well. And I want to say I'm gonna attribute it to Sir Paul McCartney. I think it was, you don't quit music because you get old. You get old because you quit music.
I love it. Do love that. That's just so powerful, you know? Nate, can you hold on for me 1 second? My dog's being a complete drama queen over here. I will be right back.
Yes, dog treats are important. Travis, I don't know if you're still recording or not, but if you are, then here you're gonna get this. Oh, you're back.
Oh, I want it anyway.
You're back already. Did you hear what I said, Gary? I said I don't know if you're recording or not, but if
Yeah. I was.
a little groove for you. I was gonna give you a little, And I probably would have done this if you weren't back. I would have said something like this: just waiting for Travis, feeling on the drums. While I wait, I got a funky groove, and I'm gonna give you some. Waiting for Travis. That's right, Travis Mark. Yo, and when he's back, we're gonna start.
Love it. I'm gonna cut that and make it my ringtone. No, I'm not even kidding. That's amazing, man. All right, Nate, for you personally, what has been the toughest part about being a career musician?
Easy. That's the easiest question you've asked. Balance.
Balance. Wow.
That's a easy one, man. I will be brief. I'm call it at the time 27, 28. I'm out in LA. I'm visiting. I'm on tour and I'm playing and I'm visiting a friend of mine who's also a drummer. His name is Tony. And Tony at that time is probably, I think Tony's about 10 years my senior. So I'm call it 27, 28. Tony at that time, 37, 38 ballpark.
Okay.
And I say to Tony, I say, Tony, his name is Tony DiAugustine. Incredible drummer. Sweetheart. I hate cliches, but like salt of the earth, as they say. Tony, what's the hardest thing about being a professional musician? And at the time, I'm like, I'm here. Tony, please tell me what's the hardest thing. Like, I'm like a pipsqueak. I'm a puppy. And Tony, and I'm expecting Tony to be like, getting your reading chops together, having great sounding gear, whatever, right? Tony says, balance.
Mm.
I go, balance between what? And he says, balance between everything. And I, at 27 or 28 years old, I went, yeah, balance between everything. Yeah, like totally. The bleep does that mean? What is he talking about? Balance between everything. Well, as I've gone on and I've hung out and I've done this thing for as long as I've done this thing, I really get it. It's balance between, for example, gigs with musicians that you love and you love the music versus a gig that pays more money.
Yeah.
Or busy on tour and I'm doing great and I'm traveling and making a living at this thing versus time at home with my family and, you know, taking my kid to school. Um, I'm busy and I'm touring and I'm making money. Oh, I'm home and I'm broke. So there's an ongoing and it is literally an ongoing balance between everything.
Yeah.
And balance is a moving target. So that would be the hardest thing. It would be the hardest thing. I remember, I mean, and it's especially hard for musicians because there is an element to being a musician that is inherently out of balance. And here's what I mean. When I was in college, I didn't have a normal college life. Here, I'll even tell you this. Check this out. When I was, let's see, what was I doing? At one point, I got called by one of my counselors. This is when I was at University of Maryland, and I got called by one of my scholarship advisors. That's what she was, scholarship advisor. And she says, "Oh, hey, Nathaniel." I was a Nathaniel back then. I wasn't Nate then. I was a Nathaniel. Nathaniel. She says, "I want to call and let you know there's a meeting of the Engineer Society on Wednesday at 6." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I have a gig." "Oh, okay. Well, also to let you know, there's the young engineers, this, that, the other banquet on Sunday." "Oh, I'm going to be practicing." "Oh, there's this. So for everything that she named three or four things. And I had some music thing that I was doing. And she says to me, "It doesn't really sound like you're having a very well-rounded college experience." And I said to her in that moment, it's funny, man, looking back on some of the things that I said when I was younger, I'm like, wow, like you knew before you knew.
Yeah.
To her in that moment, she said, "Doesn't sound like you're having a very balanced college experience." And I said, "Well, there's a difference between being out of balance and just being focused." I was focused. Now,
Yeah.
again, this is a theme of our chat today, Travis. Two things can be true. She's right. It was out of balance. It was
Yeah.
all music all the time. But I'm right. I was focused and I knew
Yeah.
what I was doing. So that's what I meant when I said what we do in terms of being musicians and other things too is inherently out of balance. I mean, if you want to be a pro tennis player, it's equally out of balance. Like
Yeah.
you know, 5 hours, 6 hours a day more on a tennis court. That's not balance. Like, where's your personal life? Where's your social? Like,
Totally.
right? So that's what I mean also when I say it's always a moving target and it's always something to strive for. So the hardest thing is maintaining some sort of balance. I remember dating in college, and I remember telling, for example, a young woman that I was dating, like, "Hey, you want to go to a movie?" "I can't." "What are you doing?" "I'm practicing." "Well, what about tomorrow?" "I'm going to be practicing." "What about the next day?" I'm gonna be practicing. Like if you want to wait until like Thursday, I can probably stop early and we can go to a movie. Okay. So yes, so that would be the hardest thing.
Yeah, man, balance. That's the thing, dude. Um, okay, let's shift back to more. Let's hope my beagle Gibson is his name.
Of
He's not
course.
usually this needy, but he's getting older, and he's gotten to this routine. I'm not home a lot at night, and he's gotten into this routine. My wife warned me because she went out. She warned me. She said, "Gets to like 8:45, and he's ready for treats." And so I just gave him a treat. I thought that would be enough. It's obviously not. Thank you for being so understanding. I'll obviously cut some of that junk out.
Why? That's real life.
That's true.
That's real life. We get so, and by the way, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your podcast, Travis.
No, no, I get it.
But it's like we get so into projecting like this perfect. I post videos of like drum camps where I'm like, if you look closely at 203, you'll see that I dropped a stick, or you'll see that I messed this up, or I meant to play that and I played this. So I don't know. You can feel free, leave it in, man. This is real life. This is like two dudes talking about
Listen, if Nate tells me to leave it in, it stays. Tell me how you personally prepare when trying to learn as much material as you tend to seem to have to play. So obviously, I'm using this question more for something like The Voice, knowing that there's always new material. But I'm also meaning it when you have touring opportunities with things like the Paul Stanley gig. You know, what's your process? Are you just listening to those records over and over and over? Are you charting them out? Are you playing along? Talk to me.
Travis, I'm trying to give you brief answers, but you're asking questions that are pretty profound. And there's not a cookie cutter answer for this, and this is why. In the same breath, you mentioned The Voice and Paul Stanley. Two more different gigs could there never be? Like,
Yep.
they're such radically different gigs. So I will just give you a very brief overview of how I approach learning songs in general across a couple of different scenarios. Let's talk about the most visible one, which is currently The Voice. I learn songs on The Voice by way of my little, I don't like the term cheat sheet, but I have a way that I sort of shorthand notate the roadmap of the tune. I will spare you because it's an entire thing that I do lessons on, and it's a bit of a long process. Simple, but long. But just to say, I have a little bit of a shorthand whereby it enables me, in most cases, to be able to listen down to something once, kind of make my roadmap as it goes, and then basically be ready to play it. I need to say parenthetically, The Voice is a cover band.
Yeah.
I'm playing in a cover band. My bass player Sasha on the show, I love him. He always says, unless you wrote the songs, you're playing in a cover band. Like if you're on tour with Janet Jackson, if you didn't write the record, you're playing in a cover. You're playing covers. You didn't write it. You're playing.
He's right.
He is right. But I digress. So The Voice is truly a cover band. We're playing all these songs. Therefore, I'm given a little bit of leeway, for better or for worse, where I don't feel like I have to play it exactly spot on, note for note transcription of what's on the record, because I'm not playing with the artist. So my shorthand gets me. I'm doing this and I'm motioning because this is my music stand here,
Yeah.
where my computer would be if I were sitting on The Voice. Now, what I always say is, if I learn a Taylor Swift song to play on The Voice, it's a very different mindset than if I get a call from Taylor Swift's MD and they say, "Can you come and play this gig?" Right? So if I get the call to go and play with Taylor, then my attention to detail is much higher because she's been on tour for X number of weeks, months, years, and she's used to hearing certain things certain way night after night. So I'm not trying to go in there and wing it.
Yeah.
So for me on The Voice, shorthand works. For me on getting called to sub for Taylor, and a lot of the time the calls that I do get, for in a situation like that. Super short notice. Our drummer broke his ankle. It's Wednesday. The gig is on Sunday. Can you learn the hour and a half set Thursday, fly Friday, rehearse once with the band Saturday, gig Sunday? So in that case, I'm taking no chances. I'm listening to the songs and I'm writing, to the best of my knowledge, a transcription of what's going on. Okay? So those are two radically different approaches. Paul Stanley was more that. Because if you
Okay.
know his songs, the Kiss Army knows those songs. So you better be pretty dang close. I allowed myself a little bit of leeway, but I'm approaching it much more like I got to give them the part for the thing. If I'm playing a song in town, a singer songwriter calls me and they're playing a gig and they're playing 9 songs and it's for fill in the blank number of bucks and it's one rehearsal and there's that. I'm probably not going to learn the songs by playing them on repeat through my headphones for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours a day to memorize them and commit them that way
Yeah.
because number one, I probably don't have the time to. And number two, I may play with that artist one single time. Like they might have that one gig or they might be in town for that one show. Now, again, taking it back into, let's call it Paul Stanley world, right? Because that's different than Taylor. I've never played with Taylor Swift on tour. But my only point being that that's different than the gig that you get called for to sub on short notice, right? The Paul Stanley gig was here's the set list. We've got 3 weeks of rehearsal. So then it's start with the parts, memorize them, commit them to memory, go. The person who's in town to do one gig one time at a small club, I can't commit that level to because I don't have the time. So I will do my shorthand. So
Okay.
three, was that 3 scenarios? So those are 3 scenarios and the different approaches to all of them. And whatever the phone rings and whatever the opportunity is, probably going to fall pretty close to one of those three. It's going to be
Okay.
learn these songs as fast as possible. You have very minimal time to rehearse. You don't necessarily want to commit them to memory forever, right? That's this side of the spectrum. Then the total opposite side of the spectrum is you're going to be rehearsing for 3 weeks. You've got time to commit these things to memory, and it needs to be pretty darn close to the record. And then
Yeah.
you've got kind of the voice, which kind of falls in the middle.
Great answer. Let's talk about how you handle nerves in these situations. Now, obviously, you've been doing the voice for a long time, and without trying to shortchange you, the voice does focus a lot on the contestant. So I suppose in that scenario, you might not necessarily be thinking, oh, yeah, everyone's watching me. Maybe there's not so much nerves involved. But with things like, and I'm going to take it back to 2005, 2006, like the Rockstar Inxs, Rockstar Supernova stuff. While it was a similar concept with a singer trying to compete for a place in a band, the house band, at least from what I remember, was showcased a lot. I mean, dude, like a lot. Like I was like, this band is on freaking fire. Um, so in situations like that, when you know that you're playing in front of like, I don't know, a lot of people consider a guy like Tommy Lee a drum hero. When you know that you've got Tommy Lee sitting there and you're trying to play Tommy Lee parts or just play parts in that rock realm in front of a guy like that, are there nerves? Like, how do you control your nerves? Or are you just like always cool, calm, and collect?
I'm going to reverse into the answer of this question, and I'm going to start that. I'm going to start that reverse into it by saying this: the times that I get nervous are the times when I feel unprepared. If I'm walking into a situation and I'm like, "Oh God, anything can happen right now." Okay, here we go. Right? And if I'm honest, that doesn't matter if I'm in a club and I'm sitting with a band that I've never played with before and I'm supposed to play some song that I've never heard before,
Yeah.
or if I'm playing on a TV show and I feel like, did we decide that the bridge was going to be 7 bars or like right? It's the same level. If I feel a little bit of unsureness, then that can lead to having nerves. Now, generally speaking, and I don't want to sound trite when I say this, but generally speaking, I don't get nervous. Or put another way, now I get hyped and I get energy, but generally, I don't get nervous. There are times when we'll play on the show and during blind auditions. For people who may or may not be familiar with the show, during blind auditions, the contestant is singing and they begin their performance singing to the backs of chairs. So I get a certain nervous energy for the contestant because I kind of hope, like, man, I hope you do a good job. I hope you get a chair turn. If you don't, it'll be so sad, and I'll feel bad that you're going home to Poughkeepsie or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But generally, if I'm prepared, I'm okay. There's also an extent to where I've developed the ability to make mistakes and land on my feet. People say to me, "Oh man, Nate, do you ever make mistakes on the show?" All the time. Really? I've never heard you make a mistake on the show. That's because you don't know what I meant to play.
Beautiful way to think of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but if I were going to say one of the things that I do if I do feel as though nerves might be an issue, or if I do feel as though my brain is operating too fast, right? I write sometimes on my snare drums. I'll just write breathe. Breathe. Remember to breathe, dude. And a great friend of mine, Taku Hirano, he's a percussionist, and he said to me, he's the one that I basically stole that from, because he said 9 times out of 10, your body knows what to do. You just have to get your brain out of the way, and that's when when if I were to get nervous, it will be because my brain is getting in the way. My brain is generating too much noise, and then that's potentially going to make me feel uneasy and not as comfortable as I want to feel. And the way that I kind of get my brain out of the way is I try to focus on my breathing, and then things kind of just generally tend to come out the way that they're supposed to. So if you now you didn't exactly ask this question, but if you or anyone was to ask me, "Hey man, I get nervous when I play. What should I do?" I would say focus on your breathing. That would be my answer. Focus on your breathing. Up to the point of the downbeat, do every single possible thing that you can to be as prepared as you can be. Learn the songs, practice it, all of that. But in the moment, focus on your breathing.
Great advice, Nate. Okay, this is my second last question, and I was quite surprised by this because I did a bit of research with this one.
Uh oh.
Because I was
Now I am nervous.
no nerves needed. Well, so the question's about AI, and I'm going to word it in such a way, and then I'll tell you what the research was quite fascinating about. My question to you is, back in the day, drummers in particular started to get super paranoid once drum machines got into the picture. They all seemed to believe in some way, shape, or form that they were going to be replaced. Nowadays, musicians, especially over the last 6 months, 12 months, believe that AI might replace us all. Uh, what are your thoughts in relation to AI being incorporated into music? And the fascinating part about it was I didn't realize that drum machines actually came out in the 1930s. Because I was like, I'd started writing this question, and my original text was in the early 80s, people seem really paranoid. Because I think back to like modern drummer magazines, and you start seeing these, the Simmons kits and the drum machine kits and all this. And I was like, no way. So I was like, I didn't want to seem unprepared to go back to your last thing. So I was like, I pull out Google and I'm like, when did drum machines first come about? First one was like sometime in the 1930s. Some guy figured out a way to make some kind of drum machine. I couldn't believe that. I mean, it must have been extremely primitive. I didn't go and check out videos and stuff if they even exist. But to bring it back to the question rather than the stupid information, I
Hey, there's only information. If
love
it's
it.
good or bad, there's only information.
Yeah, I love that, man. So yeah, what are your general thoughts about AI potentially getting incorporated into music, replacing musicians, its place in the industry? Got any general, I don't know, tinkerings?
So my experience with AI is minimal. It's minimal to the extent that in my house, right? So I live with my wife and our children. And in my house, I am made fun of because for the first time, maybe 4 weeks ago, maybe five, I got the Chat GPT app and I found a picture of me and I said, picture me as a cartoon. And then it did this animated thing of me, right? Add drumsticks. Boom. Drumsticks, right?
7,000 fingers.
Totally, totally, totally. I was so glad you said that because it gave me another hand. I had two left hands, and so then I had to go remove one hand.
Then you had two left hands and no right hand.
You've been down this road, Travis.
Yeah, I've been down this road.
So my kids make fun of me, and my wife makes fun of me. Like, I'll show them something. Look, guys, I did this thing. And my wife will whisper to one of my kids, Dad, Dad just discovered AI last week. So I say all of that. I say all of that to say that my personal experience with AI is minimal. Okay, so I'm going to give you the best. I'm going to give you an answer to the best of my knowledge. Yes, I do know players who used to make their living composing for film and TV, and now there's this thing where you can say broody, hip hop, minor chords, bass centric. Boom! And it kicks out 1,000 examples of something. So I get that exists, and I do understand that there are friends of mine and people in the industry who have less work because of that. Now, I also have a friend who is among other things, a record producer. I talked to him about it, and he said, dude, it's amazing. And I went, oh, really? And he said, yeah, because I can ask it to spit out things that in a million years would never exist. And using the model, it can spit it out. So, create drum loop if Billy Cobham played country western. Boom! And it spits out something, right? So to him, and that's on a low level of complexity, right? He's spitting out crazier, more random examples, and then he's getting these things, and then he's able to create with that. So me in my own personal life. So let's focus this. Me in my own personal life. I mean, I'm sitting around like earlier when I said to you, like I was like a 5-year-old, animal, whatever I wanted to be. In my head, I think about myself as like a 5-year-old caveman playing drums. So here's me like typing in, picture me as a 5-year-old caveman. Right? That's my extent of AI. Then, as I said, you've got the people who are potentially having less work because of it, but then you've got the people who are utilizing it to amplify what they can do. I don't have an answer to the present day version of myself, which would be an aspiring, independent, gigging drummer. I don't know exactly what to tell that person in terms of how to use it as it applies to what they do drumming wise.
Yeah.
I do see it, however. There's a band, uh, uh, Polyphia,
Yeah.
right? And my understanding, and I don't really get it, but my understanding is that somehow they're incorporating AI into the context of how they create parts and so on. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I that band. So whatever they're doing and however they're utilizing it, they're making an effective, positive, and outwardly anyway, creative implementation of what that is. I don't really know what to tell the young musicians today other than to say attempting to shoulder against the door of success, or sorry, success, of progress,
Progress. Yeah.
pickup. So attempting to shoulder against the door of progress is a losing game. You can't. No AI, I won't let you in. I won't let you in. I won't let. That's not going to work. So
Yeah.
you need to figure out the best way. Like I said, my friend who's a producer, he's figuring out the best way to apply it into what he does. I don't even know if that's an answer, Travis, but that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, look, that's a great answer, and I appreciate the thoughts. That's really what I was wanting. But I think you're pretty much nailing it. You basically embrace it, right? What is the old mantra? Yeah, change or die. And I don't want to sound that dramatic, but
Evolve, yeah, evolve or die. It really is. And I will say this. I will say I'm on the back end. Like I was here however many years ago and doing this. So I'm kind of on my way out as these things are on their way in. But yes, I would definitely say to anyone entering into this whole crazy music world today, absolutely you need to have a handle on it. And I did a master class at one point, and a young man asked a similar question. He was 14 or 15 years old, and he basically said, essentially, he alluded to AI bringing about the demise of the music industry. That was kind of the takeaway from his question, and my answer to him was, you've got to figure out how to incorporate it. AI, to the best of my knowledge, is meant to make things faster, more efficient, um, more advanced.
yeah.
And so find those things in your life that can be made faster, more efficient, and advanced by AI. Here we go. I just recently posted a like something online. I don't remember what, but maybe it was like a drum cam, right? I posted a drum cam, and in the past, historically, I'm like, okay, let's see, drum cam. Hashtag the voice. Hashtag Pearl drums. Hashtag Remo drumheads. Hashtag Zildjian. Hashtag Sennheiser. Hashtag rock drum. Right? So I go to ChatGPT. Best hashtags for drum cam video. And I go, okay, copy paste. Boom. And
Yeah.
in that little small instance, at that moment, made my life faster, more efficient, more advanced.
Which by default might take you back to balance. If you can get rid of some of those sort of tasks that are like, oh man, I got to think of this and type this, and hey man, if that can help balance, then result, right?
Right. Right. I'm not that. I, I'm semi concerned about the creative side of it because yeah, probably at some point, you'll be able to instead of going and buying a record by fill in the blank artist, you'll be able to say, spit me out a song. These, this time signature, this tempo in the vein of, since we were talking about her earlier, Taylor Swift, and then it'll spit it out, right? So that's a potential concern. Potentially, that's a major concern to the Taylor Swifts of the world and all the artists and whoever like that. Where was I going with that? Oh, I was just saying, for me again, as a primarily hired side guy, I'm not for the future of guys who want to be out there on tour and playing drums and at crypto.com and there's their drum kit and their drum. I don't. Maybe this is very short-sighted of me. Maybe we're going to get hate mail for it. I don't see AI replacing that guy on stage.
Yeah.
For example, you've got. Do you know who Hatsune Miku is?
I've heard the name, but I wouldn't want to mislead and say I know. Yeah.
Hatsune Miku is an artist. She releases music. She is ultimately the result of a computer program. And if you were to see her in concert, you would see a live band on stage of live human beings playing their instruments, and on a screen projected, a larger than life hologram of Hatsune Miku.
Wow.
I don't know how soon concert goers are going to be ready to pay their concert going money for an entire stage of hologram
Yeah.
artists and musicians. I don't know. Now, maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe next month that happens, you know.
Yeah.
But by the way, the music of Hatsune Miku, it's the most infectious, like pop. It's really it's really infectious. It's very good. And when you watch it, you understand why that is the phenomena, or she is the phenomena that she is. But I guess I just mean I don't know how soon, as a culture globally, we're going to be excited about putting down our hard-earned money to go and see not musicians playing.
Yeah. Um, it makes me think of the Gorillas. Do you know the band The Gorillas?
Much so, of course.
I mean, like the difference is they've got those, they're the characters, and then I believe at some point those screens come down and they are the actual people, but the characters are still on the screens or whatever. So
My
I don't
only
know, man, but like it is interesting to think about because I suppose in that situation there's still musicians playing.
correct.
But
And the thing is, by the way, Travis, just to jump in, I'm sorry. The thing about the Gorillas, and I am familiar with that and what that is, and that's a cool thing, but I think that's a cool thing. In other
yeah,
words, I don't know if that will ever become universally the thing.
yeah, that's a very fair point.
Don't know.
Yeah, time will tell, right? You know? Uh, Nate, I have one last question for you, sir. What do you think has either been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to a music career, or or additionally, what do you think is something you've learned along your own journey that might serve as good advice to an up and coming musician?
Okay, this is going to be a pretty easy one because I think that the answer is the same thing. Because the best advice that I was ever given is also the primary advice that I give, right? So if you were to say, "Hey, condense down to a single thought or a single concept or a single idea the most important thing." For me, this isn't universal. For me, it was the day that someone said to me, listen to as much different music as you possibly can amongst as many different genres as you possibly can, and play as much music as you possibly can with as many different musicians as you possibly can across as many different genres as you possibly can.
Yeah,
So when they said it to me, it seemed very simple. I was like, okay, well, that sounds kind of easy. Like that doesn't sound like genius at all. But that's what I did. That's what I did. I never, to our earlier conversation, I never said no to anything. I took everything. If the phone call rang and it was the description of some sort of music that I'd never heard of in my life and had absolutely zero experience playing, I absolutely said, "Yes, I'm on it." Because it's a new experience, it's a new thing. And so that's the same advice that I would give to anyone today as a jumping off point. Because now, and again, like I said, this doesn't apply necessarily to everyone, because maybe you're a diehard jazzer and you're like, I'm not trying to play every kind of style that exists. Like, I don't really give a crap about that other stuff because jazz is the be all end all. All right,
yeah,
well, then that advice doesn't apply to you. Now, I would say this though. I would say this. I would still give that jazzer that advice, because I would say, if you listen to country music and you listen to punk rock and you listen to ska and you listen to classic rock, that's going to affect your spang spangalang. When you
yeah,
play your spang spangalang, there's going to be a different element that may not be there for the guys who only ever listened to Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, Jack DeJohnette, Papa Joe Jones, Philly,
yeah.
right? So I would still give that player that same advice. I think that's the single. I think that is the single greatest concept that has done me the most good in my life and in my career.
It's great advice, powerful advice too. And it goes to show why you're the musical chameleon that you are. Because, dude, I know I said it at the start, but I will say it now that we're concluding. Anybody who hasn't seen you play needs to go and just check out some videos of you playing. I mean, I know, we're talking music, so really you could listen to examples, but visually, dude, I mean, come on. You're just
Five-year-old caveman.
so great to watch.
Five.
You're a great player. I mean, I could listen to you all day long, but you're so great to watch. They should just bloody broadcast the voice with a drum cam. I'd watch it a lot more, I promise you.
Well, Travis, like I said, I am a 5-year-old caveman. I'm still I'm still 5 years old. Every time I sit down behind the kit, and when I reference being a caveman, there's a certain I'm a very simple person. And there's a certain simplicity to the fact that, for example, I'm sitting behind a Roland V drums kit. And the technology and the chips and the silicone and the whatever is in this box that makes these sounds and all of it. But at the end of the day, I'm hitting something with sticks. I'm
Yeah.
hitting log with sticks. A very advanced, high tech log, but I'm hitting a log with sticks. So that's where the caveman reference comes in. And whenever anyone says, you look like you're having so much fun, or you're this or you're that, or whatever, it's fun to watch you, whatever, whatever. 5 years old, caveman.
Amazing.
I love it. I've been blessed to do this thing that I do, and day that I keep every day that I get to keep doing it is just pure icing.
Well, Nate, we're going to conclude there. I can't thank you enough for your time. I wish you nothing but the best for everything you do in the future. And just thanks for the years of inspiration, man. Truly appreciate you and your time.
Travis, I am always flattered, and it's very exciting for me to ever be a guest on a podcast because in my head, I think to myself, wow, that's really neat. Someone thinks that I know something. And so I consider myself blessed and I consider myself fortunate to get to be on and share information. I would only hope that somewhere amongst your listeners someone gains anything of use from anything that I've said. And as you are the vessel that created that today, thank you, and I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Peace.